So we'll start this session with a brief introduction of yourself and where you are currently based and what kind of research or your job you are doing right now.
Yes. So, hi everyone. My name is Madhushri. I am currently a PhD candidate at ATREE. I have submitted my thesis, and my open defense might happen in August or September, hopefully, fingers crossed. Um, yeah, but currently, like after I submitted my thesis, that was back in March, I joined the ATREE's environment education team. And there we are looking at different school curriculums. So the project is called Jal Jungle Zameen in Classrooms. And under that project, we are looking at like how schools basically look at natural resources. So it's basically work that we work with teachers and school children to probably inculcate these aspects of biodiversity in their curriculums, and then also look at like the existing curriculum and how it kind of treats biodiversity, natural resources, and so on. So those are the two aspects I'm working on since I submitted my thesis.
Okay.
And my thesis was looking at anthropogenic stressors on dancing frogs and on amphibian communities that live outside of the evergreen forest. So, because outside of like protected area boundaries is where anthropogenic stressors are actually congregated. So, I also looked at like the communities of amphibians that reside near and within urban centers. So
Okay.
yeah, so like basically those are the two aspects of like my PhD work. But there are also other things like I looked at perceptions. I looked at how people understand amphibians, what we mean by amphibians, what how much is their knowledge and attitude, and so I also looked at those aspects of conservation and amphibian diversity. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get to the PhD topic and point, but I am just curious about, you just mentioned like at your present work, you try to inculcate this, environment or nature in their curriculum. How does that actually works? Like there are any like subjects you teach them and then you take them to the wild to show?
So there are several things that we can do. So till now we have done like workshops. So there are also like teacher training workshops that we have done, and there are also like these smaller workshops that come under science or environmental studies or social science. That so in that we kind of try to bring in the aspects of biodiversity. So under the World Wetland Day, we collaborated under the like with the science teacher and then worked for like 3 hours to understand what is the how much people and students, basically eighth standard student, understand about biodiversity, habitats, and so on. So under like that science subject, we try to put in biodiversity. Then otherwise there's also like another project where we are trying to design the entire curriculum, so like for 11 months, and then see how we can like bring in these aspects and then teach. So that project will probably be based within schools that are in more rural setups. But yeah, but basically this is what we are trying to do. And it's also like a very new project. So it's like my boss, Pallavi, who has like a decade of experience in, working with teachers, and she's a teacher herself. So basically like it's her brainchild, and then I'm kind of working with her. So yeah, that's what we do.
Oh, nice. So
But we also look at like, the NCRT curriculum. So whatever the curriculum is existing from like class 5th to 10th, because that's where elements of biodiversity are introduced. So I'm also looking at those aspects of the curriculum, of the
that
existing curriculum.
that will be so cool for kids who are actually, kids are usually more
Yeah.
curious about nature. So if NCRT adds that there is a curriculum once in a week, they have to go in the wild and whatever they have studied they have to observe, that will be amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, once in a week is like a bit too much because teachers don't have that much of time. I mean, practically, it's not possible to do such things in like, in kind of the education system that we have right now. So, yeah,
Exactly. Let's see. Let's wait how it comes out.
yeah,
Now coming to your PhD topic,
yeah,
you did on dancing frog.
yeah.
When I was going through, and then I went through some of your YouTube, videos and how why
Yeah.
they are called dancing frog. How
Mhm.
uh, how curious that is, and was that dancing thing which attracted you to to do your PhD on that particular frog, the behavior?
No, so actually, like, there's quite a story behind, how I was introduced to the dancing frogs. So, like, back after I finished my master's, I kind of had like this small, stint with BNHS, and it didn't go quite well. I wanted to quit BNHS. I wanted to come back, and in that interim, I met Dr. Guru Raja, who is also my mentor and like a long-term collaborator now. And when I met him, he kind of introduced us, through this course that he was doing. And he introduced, aspects of biodiversity, amphibians, habitats, and so on. And then after that course, I started working on an EIA project, which was again, and he was heading the biodiversity component of that project. And then we surveyed. Several rivers in Sakleshpur, Hassan, and all these moist evergreen forests of Western Ghats. And that's when I actually saw the dancing frog for the first time, along with a lot of other endangered species. Like I remember this one particular species called Indirana gundia, which was this Indirana genus of frogs is also very interesting actually. So those frogs, and they were sitting on this, like there was this pole of bricks and rocks that was kept, and they were sitting within those, those cracks. And Guru Raja kind of pointed out, and we were looking at it, we're like, what is happening? Why are we like surveying this? So he pointed out, and then, we saw those, that Indirana gundia come out of that particular crack and things. So in the same forest, I was introduced to dancing frogs, where like there were these slow to fast flowing streams, and this like fresh water, there are, because this is usually fresh rainwater that comes in the primary streams. And on the rocks that were exposed, the dancing frogs were sitting. So some of the first photographs that I have of dancing frogs from 2014 are all in like really fast flowing streams. And at that time, there was like the only one study had happened, which was like only taxonomic survey, and I think it came out in 2014, where this Micrixalus kottigeharensis, which is an endangered species, was rediscovered kind of because there was no data from 1980s or 90s something. And then after like so many years, this species was, it kind of came up again, and then like people started talking. So Guru Raja kind of introduced me to this species, and that's how and then there, like I did like a couple of two more projects on the frog, and then wrote for a grant for Edge Fellowship. So that's how it kind of went ahead.
And as you mentioned about coming to the Edge Fellowship that you got,
Yeah.
so that surely would have helped because is this like the dancing frog? They are a species of concern.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
So
so
um, yeah, like Micrixalus as a genus actually sits on the fifth, I think it's on the list of fifth among the top 10 threatened genera of the world. So,
oh,
yeah, so Micrixalus genus, the dancing frogs in itself are a highly threatened species. However, after my work on the dancing frogs, we did kind of have a range expansion. So earlier it was known only from like two or three sites, but after my work, we kind of extended the range, and now Micrixalus kottigeharensis is not necessarily endangered. It doesn't come under the endangered category, so it was downlisted. But it still is like a threatened genera in itself because the sites are still very few in the world when you look at it from like a global perspective. The distribution is very, very little. Plus, the dancing frogs are very vulnerable. They're very sensitive because of the habitat where they live in. So that in itself makes all the 24 species of dancing frogs highly threatened. Yeah,
so we have 24 species of
yeah.
dancing. Those are present in India, you're
Yes,
telling? Indian,
all of them are present in India,
all of them.
in the moist evergreen forests of Western Ghats. It's an endemic species.
Okay, and while during this research only you visited Coorg, that I read, I think one article in Down to Earth that you mentioned because of the less rainfall, there are lesser breeding sites and it's
Yes,
affecting.
yes. The
Work
dancing
was
frogs.
on this.
Yes. So when we were doing our field work, and like from the past 2, 3 years, the monsoons have been very different. Like it's not the patterns have changed, and we know this. But wherever there is very little rainfall and where the primary streams are not flowing as rapidly, because like the flow of the stream kind of determines a lot of things. And it also determines the temperature around the stream of the water and so on. And through my work, which like this, the paper is ready, it's in review. So like the thing is that we saw that there are several little aspects of the critical habitat where the dancing frog live that kind of shows the presence of that species. So if you don't have that temperature, or if you don't have the rock temperature as much as needed, or like a 70% canopy cover, you do not find dancing frogs at all. So we don't know if they're actually migrating, but as per my observations, they are definitely not like moving out of the stream area. So they probably hide under leaf litter or somewhere, and then they kind of come out when there is like the temperatures are normal. So they will be dependent on that stream for survival, for like breeding activity. So that's why it kind of is like whenever there is like a little bit of change in monsoons or in even in the season in itself, so monsoons are depleted or they are like very high, you will not find dancing frogs very easily. You will basically just not find them. They'll be hiding or they're dying. We
Oh,
don't know.
oh, yeah, definitely. We need more research on that. And I was wondering, like, how this atmospheric event, such as change in monsoon pattern, can affect, that harshly to these amphibians. Like, I was reading, I think there are some frog species which breed only 2 to 3 days in a
Yeah.
year.
Yes, definitely. There are all kinds of frogs, and they have very, very specific habitat requirements, breeding requirements as well. So, and plus they don't migrate. So that is like the biggest concern, and that's why also amphibians are so highly sensitive to like changes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm so surprised. Like, they are so specific. Okay, so before we move forward, I think we have a question. Maybe you can answer that. Um, the
Uh,
last one.
Last one that you mentioned that you looked at frogs residing in habitats outside protected areas. Could you briefly elaborate where do you find them? You find them in most primary freshwater streams. And so my work is actually very collaborative and it kind of um, is on like, it focuses on grassroots conservation. So when we actually go in the field, we collaborate with people who live in these areas which I had found out through my recce surveys in these certain villages that I pointed out. And then after we kind of, did this like a little educational sort of educational outreach kind of a workshop. And for that, we had designed these posters. These were designed by Rohan Chakravarti. They were like these movie posters. They were also translated in Kannada and things. And through those movie posters, we kind of initiate a dialogue with people. And then most of the sites that I actually found out where the dancing frogs were living were sites within plantations. And these were all also pointed out by the people who were living in those villages. So Myristica swarms are places where you'd find dancing frogs. Then there are these plantations, acacia plantations are extremely common in like moist evergreen patches. So even in most of the plantations, there will be some fast flowing stream, slow to fast flowing streams. And if you survey those streams, then you would find dancing frogs. One of the other things is also there are certain waterfalls that are uh, that come under the ecotourism kind of label, where the forest department kind of tries to conserve these waterfalls, and around those waterfalls you'll find like several streams which are feeding into the main stream that is flowing through the waterfall. So around those streams also is like one of the areas where you would find these dancing frogs. And I mean, most often you would encounter Nilvacy dancing frog and Micrixalus kottigeharensis, which kind of co-inhabit. But there are also three other species which you find along the same stream. So they basically live. I have kind of seen five species out of like the 24 that live together, and like I'm writing grants to kind of have someone fund this additional work that I want to do beyond like ZSL fellowship. So like my projects have been in like the top three, top 15, but somehow I've just not been able to make the cut to actually get the money in my account to kind of start doing this work. So I do have like a couple of more funding that I've written to, and then we'll like kind of understand and probably also bring out a map which shows these specific areas where you'd find dancing frogs.
Yeah, grants are the key to, I think as far as research is concerned, to get them. And I think from Title Foundation, there is another question. So,
Yeah.
have you published, if you go up, published any kind of educational material for these school kids? As far as I know, I think you have one handbook, a beautifully
Yes.
pictorial
Uh,
handbook.
Yeah, so there is one handbook that I had written through a grant that I got back in 2017. And then we created an infographic, which was also created by Rohan. And that infographic, like when I get the future grant, I'm going to make it into a little flip book and kind of give it off to people in the forest department, because I think that like the flip book will look really nice. But if you want to access that infographic, it's available online, or you can just send me an email and I can send it to you. So in that infographic, we show where like the dancing frog lives, where it kind of lays its eggs, and that is based on one of my study which is already published, where we found out that the number of eggs that it lays, and also found out kind of the live tadpoles, because like in most of my work we have had zero casualties. So even when I did any molecular work, there was no killing of the dancing frogs involved. We did not have any samples that were collected just for like museum purposes, or to have it in gen banks. We used something called as buccal swabs. And when I got the Edge Fellowship, I had also gone to London to understand how this buccal swabbing is done. So through that, we did most of our DNA analysis to actually understand the species, and to like kind of say that molecularly that this is the DNA from the species, and it is Micrixalus kottigeharensis indeed. So throughout like 3 years of my study, we have had zero casualties, no tadpoles were killed, and no dancing frogs were killed to create this study. Yeah.
Yeah, I was seeing in that video, like you were telling that you open their mouth very carefully and you take that swab, is it?
Yeah, yeah, yes.
And you have to force them to open their mouth.
Yes,
To,
of course. You have to hold them. There's a spatula that I use to open it and then do
mm,
I just take the swab quickly and then put the frog back in the stream, and they will like stay frozen for like another 10 to 20 seconds, and then they just go back to doing their business.
okay, we have got another question if you would like to answer. Did you
Uh,
use
Let me
any
just
science?
see. Do you use any citizen science platforms to upload your observations? I use eBird for bird listings. But no, so I mean, I use citizen science platforms, bird related and iNaturalist, but like for my own project, there's also one more branch of my work around malformed frogs. And for that, we had collaborated with this India Biodiversity portal to create a page called Malfrogs, where you can list your sightings if you have seen, deformed frogs or dead frogs with like absent limbs, or, no eyes or something. And then you can just upload that observation to the India Biodiversity portal page under Malfrogs. And those listings we have used in my thesis chapter as well. So when we launched the page, um, I think till now we've had about 65 to 70 recordings of malformed frogs from across India. So yeah, so like people are free to, so that is also like only the citizen science kind of, data that we've used in my thesis.
Yeah, that reminded me of when Sneha Dharwadkar was mentioning about FTTI
Yeah.
India.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate to having talking to these many herpetologists of India. So coming to the, you just mentioned the bird.
Mhm.
So I think that was your stint in wildlife when you changed from, your master's in community-based rehabilitation. From there, you came
Yeah.
to first, I think, the Jane Goodall Institute.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So,
did actually several short courses around conservation to understand what we mean by biodiversity conservation, especially. So I did like a 1 year course with Jane Goodall Institute, and then I've also done like other short courses. There's also like I think 2 month course in Chinese Academy of Sciences after I had enrolled for my PhD. I'd gone there. Yeah, so just to kind of understand because my bachelor's was in physiotherapy in medical, and that wasn't my calling, that was for sure. So when I had a chance to do my master's, I couldn't get into the NCBS exam so I had applied for it, but I didn't get selected, or something had happened, or I missed the date, or like something just happened, and I just couldn't get into any master's program. So then I opted to do like a master's in community-based rehab, which comes under physiotherapy, but we work with public health and we work outside of hospitals with many marginalized communities. So that actually helped me understand a lot about, what we mean by grassroots communities. It also helped me strengthen my biostatistics. It also helped me understand, women and children issues and things. So that was also one of the reasons why I wanted to be in a more interdisciplinary setup. I didn't, I mean, I can't like be in very like, streamlined ecology institute. Like it's just not possible for me. So ATREE that way like was a win-win situation.
so
Yeah.
how you got in actually ATREE uh, for this PhD?
Yeah, so it's the same thing. Like when I finished that EIA project with Guru Raja, he kind of suggested that maybe you should explore, looking at PhDs, because what are you planning to do? Like I can't keep doing these small projects all the time. And when I was also doing those EIA projects, there was a lot of report writing in it. There was like analysis, short analysis that we did. And he's like, you have the skills, so why don't you just try, to get into a PhD? And I think like personally, my understanding about PhDs is also that it comes from a lot of conditioning, right? Like when you're growing up, you are asked to study, 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 study higher, do like better, get into academic jobs. So I come from that kind of a family also, that
Okay.
where, studies were very important, although I didn't do it in school. But but like I was like an average student, and I was always into sports and things. So outdoors was always my thing. But there was like always this conditioning that I had heard as somebody growing up that you should study higher. So that is why I could also easily enroll into masters without, like, obviously there were issues, but yeah, there was no stopping me from studying higher. So
So,
in that sense also, like I knew that PhD has to happen
so
if I have to like be in conservation.
basically, no one asked you और कितना पढ़ोगे in your family.
हाँ मतलब ऐसा नहीं है, पूछा उन लोगों ने. And especially I think me being a girl, it's like you don't need to study so much also. Yeah, you can just like get married and stay happy in your life. You don't have to necessarily study so much. And I think what my parents kind of struggled to understand is, why is she studying now? Like, at this point when you're like 25, 26, you want to kind of, settle down, find a job and kind of, find a partner to marry and move ahead in your life in like the, so they had like a lot of issue understanding why she wants to study at this point. But they didn't understand that my study is actually a lot of fun for me because I get to like go in forests and kind of explore all these places and things. And it's also something that kind of makes me happy. So reading about nature, environment has always like been my thing. Even so schools, I used to be a part of like these nature clubs, bird watching clubs and so on. So reading, I have only as as a child, read like books that inspired, that had nature, elements of nature in it, birds especially. So, I mean, that was always there. But so my parents, I think they had that issue कि अभी क्यों पढ़ना है? मतलब पढ़ो तुम, but maybe like get married first and then study. So yeah, so those were like difficult questions. But I think at the end, my father is very Brahminical in his understanding. He's like, मेरा बेटी पढ़ रहा है, तो she has to study. Like, let her do PhD. So it's
Yeah,
always that, yeah, that kind of
to
wins.
that to that point, as you mentioned, although you come from very good background where they expect you to study more, but we have that stigma and that
Yeah,
well-known fact that if you're a woman, then you shouldn't go this high, or like studies and
yeah,
different
yeah,
problems we face. So I just wanted to ask, as you selected your PhD something herpetology where you had to do field studies, and I was
yeah,
seeing your writings that you have to go out in the night to spot
yeah.
them to collect the data.
Yes,
So what kind
yes.
of difficulty you faced as a woman in science, if you would like to say?
I mean, that's like a whole article, right? Like I can write a book on that. But I think, as in the Indian society, I think has these issues where we want our women to work, but we cannot have them live peacefully in a working environment. And there, especially in academia, I mean, there are just a lot of issues. Like sexism is just one thing that kind of is there, but it's also, I mean, I don't know how to put it. It's just that we are not used to historically kind of see women in positions of power. And to me, a PhD is a powerful position. So when we put like women in those positions, it's just harder for everybody else to comprehend, what exactly is happening. But I
Yeah.
think as we are moving forward, like it's just like the women like me, basically, who are, in this situation where we've just kind of submitted or even like joining, we just have to kind of persevere. So I have this very interesting person as a mentor in a ZSL called Benjamin Tapli. So he often says that, Maddie, your uh, test is really about perseverance. So when I was in the top 15 of the Whitley Fund for Nature this year, he messaged me saying that even if you don't get it this year, you're probably going to make it in the next 2 or 3 years. So it's like so that learning is very important as a woman for me to, kind of focus on the perseverance aspect of like being in the field of conservation. And I mean, of course, like there are other things, and you can't always kind of, persevere just because you're passionate about it, because at the end of it, it's also a job. You need to make a living out of it. But it's still like, still today, I think that is like the biggest challenge, how to persevere and how to kind of move ahead through these challenges of lack of funds, no jobs or whatever. And, like there are obviously other issues that happen in a PhD. There will be differences of opinions. There will be so many things that you have to navigate through. But yeah, at the end of it, you've won if you have kind of persevered. And that is my understanding if you want to really do a PhD. But obviously, like I have come to realize that even in my batch in ATREE, there was about, I think, 40 to 50% fallout rate. And all the people who fell out of the PhD are actually incredible people. So it's because of my conditioning that I want to have this degree. But I think even if you don't have like a proper PhD, you could still do incredible work. Yeah. So I think that is something that everybody should know.
Yeah, that's a good take-home message for any PhD for that matter, not only for the girls. But I would like to ask, like, as you have gone through your, PhD, you have done the field work. So, what would you actually suggest to any institute or, PIs to make environment more nurturing for, girls and women to come in science? What would you suggest?
Uh, I think my suggestion would be that we have to so we need, like, I think everybody who is at the position of power as PIs especially have to understand that they need women to be in conservation. So when you go in with that basic understanding that you need to have women in conservation, in research, in academia, then they will do better. The other thing is also, so it's also like PIs also have to condition themselves to believe that, this is an important change that we need to bring in. So that is like really the starting point. But the other thing is that I also feel like you should have some sort of policies in place. And as an individual, you need to understand and you need to see around that you probably are not seeing as many women in academia. Even though we see women in doing masters, doing their higher studies, we do not find women in positions of power, holding academic jobs particularly. So I think the most important thing is that you need to have like this awareness in place, and that awareness will only come if like the handful of people who are actually doing PhDs kind of persevere in the field. And I think it also comes from the fact that at an institutional level, if there can be some kind of changes when you hire people, right? If you have, say whatever, maybe a reservation or maybe like some policy in hand which says that, hire people from other genders or hire people, hire women, whatever, like just have something in place, and that will also come through awareness. It will not come just by mentioning, but if at an institution level you can have this kind of an awareness and a policy in place, I think that would make like a big difference. And I feel even when I was like doing this hiring for my edge project, and I because I knew how difficult it is to kind of get these fellowships and even to work in the field as a woman, I tried to actively hire more women, in my team. So we were like four women and one man as a team, working on frogs. And at that time, because I had the power, I had the money to kind of hire, I could, make these changes. But it's not possible for everybody to do it. And therefore, there's that need to kind of, at like bigger institutional level, that you have this understanding that when you look at your, people who are in your working in your organization, you actively make a change to kind of hire people from other backgrounds and even neurodivergent people, even people from other genders and women. So I think that's like it has to come from an institutional level, and it has to also be fueled by kind of self-awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good point to, take note for any institutes and even those who are, as you mentioned, powerful position as a PI and all.
Yeah.
Another, as you're just mentioning about the financial stuff when it comes to the any conservation science,
Yes.
you know, and not only about the wildlife. So I was just reading something, so I would like to tell you this one. Uh, Most people seeking to find their wildlife career paths end up feeling dejected, lonely, financially unstable,
Mm.
and under the imposter syndrome at some point of time in their life. These
Yeah.
are your words.
Yeah.
And it,
Yeah, this is from the article. Actually, this article was like circulated so widely, and I still date, I receive emails from like supervisors and PIs saying that, this is like an eye-opening article. Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so this particularly this word, imposter syndrome. Like I have heard, I think first I heard from Ashwini, and
Mm,
definitely almost all the PhDs do
yeah,
face it one point or the other.
yeah.
So how you dealt with it? What would be your advice to that? All
Uh,
these things.
so I don't necessarily have. I mean, I don't have imposter. I don't have an issue kind of, talking to people. Um, But I mean, I am introverted, but I'm not like I do not kind of have imposter really. But my issues are mostly from even when you ask for help actively, you do not get it in conservation, because I don't think that in academia and in conservation there is this feeling that we are together. You know, everybody in academia and especially in conservation and biodiversity institutes think that they are kind of going to solve the problem themselves. And there is no other problem in the world where you think that you're going to do it all by yourself, right? Like, so here also we can have kind of like a little collaborative and more friendly approach towards people. So, so like, of course, like people who have imposter and who like have difficulties talking to people, they are in a very difficult boat, right? But even for people like me who can like actively talk and actively ask for help, I do not get it. So, so it's like a terrible situation. So I think what people in academia really need to know is that we have to work at this issue of conservation as a family or as whatever you like to call it, maybe like a peer group or like a task force or like just call it whatever. But I'm saying that it has to have like some form of professional, togetherness amongst ourselves. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult. Like there have been instances where I have asked people about, this fellowship that you have got. Maybe you should help me, like, because you've got that fellowship. So you are out, like, you won't get another of the same kind of fellowship, right? So if tomorrow somebody asks me about Edge fellowship, I go out of my way to tell them, like, do this, do this, do this, do this, okay? And I even send out my application to them if they ask for it. But I have seen that many times when I ask other people about fellowships, they just don't open their mouths. They'll be like, "Yeah, just read the guidelines. I'm sure it's written on the page on the website. You'll find it." And I'm like, if I had to find it on the website, then I'd just go there directly. Yeah. So this is the problem. And when I was doing my medical as a bachelor, that time there was this kind of a collective, okay? We were always together and we were always helping. And even then I used to crib about how we're not helping each other. But then I came into conservation to actually realize what is not helping each other. Like, because that's when I realized that, the kind of collectiveness that we had as medicos is very different from conservation. In conservation, everybody's like, they just like on their own separate paths and they just don't want to like come together. So this is when I realized that as medicos you are so connected and you're like always helping each other, because there the point of view is that you have to help the patient, so you are working for a greater good. Of course there is money involved in it, you are paying, you are asking for charges, you're not like doing free work. But there's always this thing where you're working for a greater good. But in conservation there is no such thing. You will find all the species, you will collect all the taxa, you will enlist them, you will discover 10 species, so all those things are like very common here. And I think over time as we realize the benefits of collaboration, maybe it'll go away. But I mean, yeah, maybe it is also fueled by imposture, that a lot of people have it. And so people just don't want to talk to each other about things. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what will solve these issues, but I do know that they are very prominent in conservation circles.
But I think they all need someone from Netherlands to come to India, become priest
Yeah,
and give
yeah,
the
yeah,
advice,
that too. Yeah.
find that.
Yes, that too. Yeah. And I mean, in herpetology, like you can name groups, right? Like, this is a group, this is a group, this is a group. Like, that's very common. Uh,
Definitely, we don't want lonely conservationists in which your
yeah.
article.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
any particular incident you came across while doing your field survey for this dancing frogs?
Um, I think something that really stays in my mind till date is how biodiversity conservation conversations are very different for different people, okay? Because for me, when I work, conservation is like my point of view. That's my lens, right? I want to do only conservation, whatever it is. But I've seen that, when we have been doing our outreach work or just talking to people just to kind of understand where they stand, how much knowledge they have about dancing frogs and things. There was this Myristica swamp, which is like a enclosed swamp, freshwater swamp, and it was beside a temple, okay? And in so I was just talking to like the priests and the people who were like in the family. So it was like an entire family. There were women, everybody was sitting together, and we were just talking. And so he told me about, like, we went there, we surveyed. I got the buccal swabs from that swamp, and I came out, and then he told me about how the swamp is like, it acts like a sponge, and it holds water in the dry season, and all of these very interesting things. And he was also somebody who didn't enter the swamp with footwear. He removed the footwear, and then he walked in the swamp. But when we came out, and he told me all these like nice stories about water conservation and how it kind of holds water in the dry season and all that. And then I come out, and when we are sitting, we are having chai in his house only. So so he says that, madam, you talk very nicely about this conservation, about biodiversity on that. But many times when there is like dry season, and there's not enough water for everybody in the village to drink and to use. So there's not enough potable water in the village, even though the village is like at this moist evergreen elevated forest that and then you have the swamp on the side of the forest. You still don't have like potable drinking water for like the entire year. And that kind of opened my eyes because, when we speak about biodiversity, that is our way. But when you don't have the basics in place, like, food on your plate, water in your house, then it's very hard for people to kind of see the importance of like biodiversity and that particular frog that I have swapped. So so, I mean, that like also is why I kind of always remind that to myself that, when we speak about biodiversity, we have to be very careful about this situation because you don't know who you are talking to, plus you don't know what they have and don't have and what their concerns are. So when he said about the water issue, everybody like it was like there were other people as well, and they all said that हाँ पीने का पानी नहीं आता है कभी कभी, so इतना इतना problem हो जाता है dry season में, even though like that sponge is there, that the swamp is still there. So I mean that is very important, like for us to also understand that something as basic as drinking water, which like I have all the time, is not available to somebody who lives that close to the forest and just beside a swamp, right? Beside a freshwater swamp. So, yeah, I mean, there are these several other things as well that kind of then comes through when you see that also these societies are. I mean, there are also like caste issues, there are also other issues, gender issues in those families. But yeah, I mean, just to see like this perspective of those people and how they see biodiversity concerns is very eye-opening, and it kind of always this is like a situation that I always remind myself to, be like grounded and understand what we are talking about really. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminded me like you did your work in Manipal, right?
Yeah.
Your uh, your field survey, and I
Yeah.
was seeing some videos of that, Manipal, that how with the growing infrastructure and growing, people are coming from all over the place, and its habitat is getting destructed.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
what are actually, major concerns when it comes to, all the frogs for that matter, not only about
Um,
dancing frogs?
so there are like tons of concerns, okay. And I have this one paper that is also going to come out this year, hopefully, where we have looked at several anthropogenic stressors from an amphibian's perspective. Basically, we are showing them. So even things like everything that you can think of is actually a concern. So anthropogenic noise, light, um, roads, road infrastructure, invasive species. There are like just so many that I can list. And on all of this, there has been some scientific work that has been done to prove these points. And something that is very important is how just anthropogenic noise, is so important because frogs call at this 1 to 5 kilohertz frequency. Like they have their mating calls at this frequency, and then anthropogenic noise is also in the same frequency, so it kind of masks the animal acoustic communication, and that is very prominent in amphibians because amphibians' main way of communicating to attract mates is through calls. There is no other way. They're not doing any elaborate display except the dancing frog that is doing the display. But even then, anthropogenic noise of like aeroplanes, the honks, honking, traffic noises kind of masks the entire communication. So, and there have been like several studies on this, but a very few studies actually come from the global south, the neotropics, and the developing countries. And in the tropical countries, like developing countries like India, are actually mega diverse countries. So where there is more diversity, you have very few studies coming up to understand anthropogenic stressors. But in like most developed countries, this has been established that these kind of mask the species communication. So that is like through this Manipal study, this is what we showed that through like a review article that is going to come out, that there are all these issues, and in India we see these issues overlapping with the protected area boundaries very closely, because even in like Western Ghats you don't have forest patches that are like purely natural without any anthropogenic stresses. There are stresses all the time. There is trash, there is some kind of nitrate phosphate mixed in the streams. There are like all the time, there is like something that is happening. And those things affect amphibians in like ways that we are probably not aware of so far in the country. So yeah, so there has to be like more work that needs to be done to even understand which species is actually going to go extinct. And urban centers, when it comes to urban centers, it's established that where there are like all these stressors that are overlapping, there are no frogs. And when you go towards the edge and like towards forested patches, then you see that the diversity kind of increases. And through my work, I also show like functional diversity differences. So life history traits that are very different in different animals. Those animals occupy forested areas and occupy areas where there are more microhabitats. So yeah, so like that is also one of the chapters in the Manipal the study. That is what we have seen. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So definitely, like there are different microhabitat when it comes to maybe urbanized areas compared to
Yeah.
comparison to the natural forest, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nice. So this flexing of muscle by this dancing frog was not anthropogenic, right? To avoid the
No,
noise.
no, that male frog is just dancing to attract females.
Oh,
And also
so
for
that's
territorial defense. Also for territorial defense.
oh. So how is it like? Whoever can flex it the highest, they will be considered.
No, so right now what we know of is that they kind of climb on each other as well and on the higher rocks to
Mhm.
show off their moves. And then the male that is on top of that rock kind of mates with the female in that area.
Oh,
So, yeah, so it's also for like territorial defense, but it's also like a show off, actually a show of strength,
okay.
so to say. Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
That's interesting. And any other frogs also flex their muscles, or they show this behavior?
Yeah, there are a bunch of such frogs, that this is called visual signaling. It's not called dancing. It's dancing is like, yeah, I
Our
mean, yeah,
yeah.
whatever. But yeah, this is called visual signaling, and there are frogs that actually they also move their forelimbs and hind limbs, and then there are different kinds of moves. So in kottigeharensis, we have not been able to establish like a lot because it kind of wasted a lot of our money and time when we were trying to figure out what is happening and how to describe the moves.
Yeah.
But what we've seen is that in Micrixalus kottigeharensis, there is like an alternate movement of the hind limbs. But if you see Micrixalus niluasi, you will find a very different kind of a move. They're also moving their hind limbs, but they're very active and they are actually like literally kicking away the males, and you can see it in front of you. It's happening, and Micrixalus kottigeharensis are very slow when they are doing these things. So like after like 2 minutes, 3 minutes of observation, you will see like one male has gone down, and then he'll be like slowly
Oh,
climbing up. But with Niluasi, you will find that they're just like constantly kicking, constantly throwing people down, like throwing frogs down,
oh,
so they're probably, and they're also then a lot in number compared to Micrixalus kottigeharensis. So yeah, but then this is all just like observational. I have no written evidence of this. I don't know if anybody else has. Yeah.
so these dancing frogs, they are situated or located at particular area or throughout India we can find them.
No, only through Western Ghats in the moist evergreen patches. So above, I think, 270 meters above the mean sea level, not lower than that, and till I think 700 meters. In the Sholas, when you reach the Shola Islands, you don't find them. You find them only in like below the sholas and above where like the tree line starts of the Western Ghats. That's where you find them in the primary streams, that too in the primary streams. And only like the moist parts of Western Ghats. So in Maharashtra, I think you have like two or three sites which I had found. Goa has, Karnataka and Kerala. That's it. Nowhere else.
Oh,
Yeah.
so they are limited to the Western Ghats.
Yes,
Nice.
yes, they're endemics. They're endemics. Yeah.
And one question I think we have got, what's the best part of working with this particular genus and also the most challenging one?
Best part is that I am still writing grants and hopefully hoping that I will get money to do my research. Um, but I think in general, Micrixalus is a great kind of a species to work. It's also a very interesting species, and I've seen that people, when you say frogs, people often think that they are ugly and they're dirty. But with Micrixalus, that is not the case because Micrixalus lives in very pristine habitats, and it is also active throughout the day. So you don't have to necessarily get out at night to see Micrixalus. Yeah.
And
So, I mean,
uh,
those are like really the good parts, and that helped me to get my forest department permits because there I went and I said, after 6 o'clock, I will not work, so you don't need to worry about my safety. So,
oh,
yeah,
so you could do your work before the
during the
night
day,
falls.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. But not so
that's
much in
nice.
Manipal. Like when we were working in Manipal, I had to do around like, but we used to close our surveys by 7:30 max.
Okay. So do they have any this timing? They are most active at this particular time, something like that?
Yes, usually mornings and evenings are most active.
Oh.
Yeah. Because
And
afternoons are slightly warmer, so afternoons you don't find them being very active. Mornings and evenings they're extremely active, and you'll also hear them.
and
Yeah.
okay, and this dancing sessions, it is related to monsoon or something?
Yeah, so they will only do it after like post monsoons, when they are breeding. And we've seen that in our work, August, September, October, November are like the best season. August, in case when there is less monsoons, but then when the monsoons are nice, then even in August you won't find them. Then it gets delayed. So when the monsoon is actually receding, that's when you find them dancing more. Uh, yeah,
Post monsoon, that is.
yeah, post monsoons.
And I was listening to one of your YouTube video. So we don't have toxic frogs in India. That's true.
No. Yeah, you don't have any kind of um, I mean, that's what we know so far, okay, from what we know. Yeah. None of the frogs are as poisonous as the poison dart frogs, for example. So, yeah, so you wouldn't die if you touch a frog. Yeah. But like with toads, for people who are extremely sensitive and things, if a toad pees on you or something, then you might develop like an allergy. But yeah, but I have never heard of it. And people say it happens, but they'll say like, oh, it's burning or whatever. But apart from that, I have not heard anything else. Yeah.
So there are no, for sure, there, as of now, there are
Yeah.
no this toxic or poisonous
Yeah, no poisonous
toads
frogs.
or what's actually the key difference between toad and this? Uh,
Toad and a frog.
I know
It's
I
like
might be so ignorant, but please.
it's actually just so frogs and toads both come under amphibians, okay, and they are scientifically called anurans, which are basically which are they also are called tetrapods at times because they walk on all fours and they don't have and they live on the land. But so scientifically speaking, frogs and toads are the same thing. They are just anurans, okay?
Okay.
But in English, I mean, these are just words to kind of differentiate a frog from a toad because frog is supposed to be more slimy
Okay.
and it's supposed to also live on trees or like in areas which have a lot of water. And the toads are usually found in areas which are dry. Plus, toads have warts on them. These small pimple-like things coming out of their skin, and they're also very drier looking, drab looking creatures
Oh,
when compared to frogs. So, like, there are all these kind of differences in popular science, but scientifically speaking, they all come under the same tag of anurans.
oh, oh, now I feel good. There is no
Yeah, I
scientific,
mean,
scientific, there are no
yeah,
much differences.
they're just like, I don't know. It's just I think a language thing,
Okay,
so to say.
okay. And nice to know they are called anurans because I worked on anumurans. So
No,
sounds
yeah,
quite
anurans. Yeah,
similar.
yeah.
Okay, so what is your overall, view of this PhD as we are reaching towards the end of our conversation? If you have to summarize,
Mm.
and if you want to give, take home message to someone who is willing to or looking forward, because I recently talked to someone who want to do PhD in behavioral this behavior, how they breeding behavior or something of these frogs.
Mm.
So what would be your take home message from your PhD journey and your advice to them?
I think my after like going through this thing, and I knew this even like before I actually entered, because thanks to like my mentors and people who were very vocal about it, that if you are entering a PhD, it should be with a purpose of getting out of that PhD by having a degree, not like leaving. So, if you are sure that you want this degree for your benefit, then kind of do this PhD to like get out of these 5 years, right? Don't do a PhD thinking that you are going to solve like a big problem or like you're going to win a Nobel Prize, because that's not going to happen for normal people like me, average people. Okay. If you are like, obviously, if you're smart and if you can do it, like go ahead and do it. But I think for most of us, when we enter with a purpose that we will get a degree and that we will kind of look beyond and kind of, step up. It's like a step up. So you look at it like that. And then the other thing is that you should always make sure that your funds are in place, that you know who is going to give you the stipend. You don't enter a PhD and then figure out, Abhi, I will figure out where my stipend is coming from, right? So you don't want to be in that situation. So make sure that it is well funded, that you know where your research money is coming, you know where your stipend is coming from, you know what are the benefits that you have. Like even like for women, maybe maternity benefits, what do you have or what you don't have? Because somehow, this PhDs for women and even for other genders kind of comes at a very critical level when you are, 26 to 30. That's also like a time when you want to start a family or maybe like get married or like have a partner or do whatever. So, I mean, those things shouldn't like you shouldn't feel like just because you are into this PhD, you can't like do other things and live like a personal life. So I think those two things should be like whatever you want. I'm not saying that you need to have it, but you just need to be aware that there are these situations that might happen or might come into your life. So you need to be prepared for those. So I think funding and then like looking at the PhD as a step up. कि तुम उसमें घुसे हो तो you will get out with a degree, unless of course like if there are it's extremely difficult and like the situation is not right and then you just want to get out, then for sure get out. But I'm saying that enter with that kind of a mindset, of an academic mindset, because like this is really what academia is all about. So yeah, I think those two things are really important. Yeah.
Nice take home messages
Yeah.
and definitely worth noting them. We'll finish with one last question we got from Anuja, PhD in India versus abroad. So what would you suggest?
Uh, it really depends, but I'd say that abroad, the professional and personal boundaries are very defined, and that is a win-win situation. In India, a lot of times because your funds are coming and your funds are also dependent, or like some other things, a lot of times like your personal and professional boundaries are not very clear, and I think as people, we have also not been able to kind of set up these boundaries for ourselves. So that becomes very difficult then. And then it becomes like a power relationship between your advisor and yourself. So you probably don't want to get into that. So like even if you're doing it in India, I think you should make sure that the institute that you've signed up for has like policies in place that matter to you, and have all these things in place, and you don't kind of end up in like a very difficult situation. So I would say when you're entering in like a PhD, you just make sure to talk to people who have graduated from that program. And that kind of gives you a lot of perspective. Now, of course, this will need you to get out of your imposter and do things, but writing emails, figuring out who was, who had like that position before you are going to take it up. Talk to other people in that organization, and I think that is extremely important if you're going to do it in India, to know things. Plus, many times getting a PhD abroad is also difficult. Like you have to really look at the logistics of it, how you're going to work and things. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter wherever you get in. If you're going to do it, like just do it in a place where things are like policies are in place and like things are good. Even abroad, I've heard a lot of cases which were not really nice. So, I mean, it's not like you can't look at like just because you're doing your PhD abroad and when you come back to India, everybody's going to like do wawa of yours. It's not like that. Even abroad, you could like end up in a very difficult situation, in a very lonely situation as well. And yeah, I mean, just like looking at it from so many different perspectives is important. And talking to people who have done that particular PhD program is, I think, very important.
Yeah, I think, and that's a perfect, I think, advice to that question.
Yeah.
So I think that answers the question to Anuja. And Anuja, sooner I think I have contacted some people who are doing PhD outside, so maybe you can ask directly to them as well how it is there. So, but definitely that's the key point. Unless you know about your PI and their track
Yeah.
record, I don't think it's a good
Yeah.
way to just go outside for the sake of going outside. It's always good to have information around the lab and about the PI. So thank you so much, Anuja, for asking question. I think she has written something for
Yeah.
you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. So thank you so much, Madhusri, for taking time out and having this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I just looked at the time and I didn't realize कि 1 घंटे हो चुके हैं अभी तक.
हाँ.
So it was
Yeah.
so amazing talking to you. Another
Thank you.
someone. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
So,
Siddesh
Anuja,
and Gautam. Yeah.
yeah. So, Madhusri, all the very best, and I hope to get in touch with you once again after a few years when you are
Sure.
leading some team about education and leading
Fingers
students
crossed.
to the
Fingers
leading
crossed.
students to the wildlife and making them aware how
Yeah.
beautiful nature
Yes.
is. So, thank you
Fingers
again.
crossed and touch wood. Everything. I hope so. I don't know. Like yeah, I'm also in the situation where I'm applying for jobs and postdocs and figuring out. So yeah, let's hope that your words come true.
Yeah, definitely. Good thing happens to good people. So,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
bound to happen. So, anyways, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Madhusri. We'll
Thank you.
wrap it up.
Yes.
So, thank you for joining. Tata
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.
See you. Yeah.
Bye. See you.
Bye.